All right, good evening. My name is Catherine, and I work with SEB Housing. And this is the information session for the 3 affordable rental housing units at Center East Commons, located in Amherst, Massachusetts. So the purpose of this session is to give you a little bit of background information on the available units. I'm also going to cover the application, the eligibility, and the lottery process, and then what to expect after the lottery itself. If you have any questions during the session, you're invited to go ahead. You're encouraged to type in your questions to the chat feature in Zoom, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask a question. When you came into the session, you were muted, so just keep that in mind. So this is a live session. It's being recorded because it's going to be posted to SEB Housing's YouTube channel, so it will be available there later on tonight if you should need to watch this after the fact. If you think of any questions after tonight's session, after the live session tonight, you can connect to us by email at info@sebhousing.com. That's the quickest way to get in touch with us, but if you'd prefer to call, you can do that as well. And our number is up on your screen, the 617-782-6900 extension 1. That is the main number for SEB Housing. So if you have any issues hearing me, or if you have any trouble viewing the screen, please let me know during the session. I'll be stopping periodically too with all the information that I'm giving to make sure that nobody has any questions. So I'll just get right into it. So just want to start out by giving you some background information on who we are. So SEB Housing, we're an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team or the leasing office for Center East. We have been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, and then collect and review applications to determine your eligibility before running the lottery eventually. So in the initial phases of this process, we are your main point of contact rather than the leasing office at Center East Commons. But further along in the process, we will be passing your information along to the leasing office, and you would be in touch with them. So there's 2 broad steps in the process. The first is to apply for the affordable housing program. And during that step, you'll be in touch with us at SEB Housing. We can answer any questions you have on the affordable housing program. We'll review your application and the supporting documentation that you've submitted. And if you're eligible, you'll be entered into the lottery and eventually be given a position on the waiting list for one of these apartments. The second step in the process is when you'll be in touch with the leasing office for your lease eligibility. So that's separate from the screening that SEB Housing would be doing. And the leasing office's screening could include your rental history, background checks, credit checks, that sort of thing that you might be familiar with if you've rented before. Once you've been approved by the leasing office, you would work with the leasing, you'd continue working with the leasing office to reserve and lease one of the apartments. So just wanted to give you that overview of the difference in the 2 different screenings that you'd be participating in. So if you haven't already, you can go to our website. It's sebhousing.com. And if you click on affordable housing opportunities and select I want to rent, you're going to see Center East Commons listed, and there's a page specific to the property that has downloadable versions of the lottery application, the information packet. And the information packet is what contains most of the information or most of the material I'm going to be covering during tonight's session. There won't be time to cover every single item that's in that packet, but I will be reviewing the main points. And we always encourage anyone who is interested in renting at the property that you check out that information packet, even if you did attend this session. So if you do choose to apply for one of these affordable units at Center East Commons, you will first need to complete that lottery application that is available on our website. You can then submit it to us in one of several ways. So whatever one of these ways is most convenient for you, You can email or scan it to info@scbhousing.com. You can fax it to us. Our fax number is listed on the first page of the application. You can send it by regular mail to our address in Needham, which is also on the first page of the application. And I know that most of you are probably not going to be in the Needham area, but if you are, there is a drop box at our office building as well. And all of that information is listed on the first page of the application. So you can pick whichever one of those options is easiest for you. Most people do submit it by scan or email, just because it's easiest for most people, but that might not be true for all of you. So we encourage you to get your lottery application in early if you think you'll be interested in these affordable housing units. It is a fairly lengthy application. You're going to see that when you're reviewing the application. There's a lot of supporting documentation that's required, which I'll be talking through as well during tonight's presentation. Your applications are due by 2 p.m. on January 8th, so a little bit under a month left to apply, and applications do need to be postmarked by that date, January 8th, in order to be considered for the lottery. We'll work with you if you submit an application and maybe not all of the supporting documentation is included. We'll work with you just as long as you get, your initial application, maybe not with all of the supporting documentation in by that deadline of January 8th. And like I said, we'll work with you. We'll send you checklists and speak with you about what is missing if there is anything that you haven't submitted yet. You do not need to be a resident of Amherst to apply for this lottery. There are going to be several units that have local preference for residents of Amherst, and I'll discuss that a little bit later on as well. But if you don't live in the town, you should not at all be deterred from applying. All right, so a little bit more background information on the properties. So there is a website for Centuries Commons. So you can check that out as well. So it's centuriescommons.com. There's a little bit more information about the area, the neighborhood, a full list of amenities, some photos, that sort of thing. So you can check out that website. And Centuries Commons, so it's a brand new development located at 462 Main Street in Amherst, Massachusetts. The building is at 462B Main Street. So the 3 affordable apartments are going to be in Building B, and they're going to be rented to households with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income for the Amherst area, Amherst-Springfield area. The apartments are going to have quartz countertops, quality energy efficient appliances, hot water, as well as cold water and sewer charges are going to be included in the rent, and tenants will be responsible for paying electric, which includes electric heating, cooking, and just the general electricity charges. Centuries Commons is also close to downtown Amherst, the local colleges. There's a PBTA bus stop outside of the community, so that may make it more convenient for many of you. And units are expected to be ready for occupancy immediately following the lottery, which will be in February. Well, actually, I think it's late January that the lottery will be. So these will be ready right away after you go through the eligibility and lottery process. So there shouldn't be a wait there for you. There will be affordable studio and 1-bedroom apartments that will be offered, and households with a total annual income of at or below 80% of area median income will be eligible to apply for the lottery. So there's one studio apartment that features 428 square feet. That studio will rent for $1,275. And then there's 2 1-bedroom apartments, one of which will feature 506 square feet and will rent for $1,375. And then the other 1-bedroom apartment is a bit larger at 646 square feet, and that's going to rent for $1,450. The larger of those 2 1-bedroom apartments is also considered disabled accessible, so it has features for persons with mobility impairment. So you want to keep in mind that this particular affordable housing opportunity is not subsidized housing. and the affordable rent amounts are not set based on individual applicants' incomes or financial circumstances. So the rent isn't going to change based on whether or not your income changes. So if you lose your job or if you get a raise, your income is not going to be changed to coincide with those financial changes, like you might be familiar with if you have a mobile housing voucher like Section 8 or MRBP. That is a separate program. Voucher holders are welcome to apply, but it's just handled separately. So the rents for this housing program are set using a formula that is based on HUD, so the Department of Housing and Urban Development's area median income for Amherst. And they're set with the idea that the amount should be affordable to households making up to 80% of AMI. So these amounts may increase once per year, and it typically occurs in the spring when HUD revises their area median income. Advance notice would always be given to tenants whenever a rent increase is upcoming. Usually the increases are pretty modest, no more than about $25 to $75 a month, and rents will never change in the middle of your lease term. So if you leased one of these apartments for January or February, you're not going to have that rent increase in 2023. The earliest rent increase that you would be seeing wouldn't be until probably the spring of 2025. So the affordable units at Center East Commons, so they were selected by the owner. They've already been approved by the state agency that oversees this affordable housing program because they're a representative of units within the building as a whole. This means they're not the smallest units. They're not all clustered in one location. They're not identifiable as being affordable in any way from the outside. The features and the finishes of the market rate and affordable units are going to be similar to one another. And so since it's possible that there's going to be more interested and eligible applicants than there are available units, because we only have 3 affordable units at this property, that's why we need to do a lottery and hold this lottery process for households who qualify for the lottery. So those that have incomes at or below that 80% of AMI. I'll talk about those income limits a lot more in just a couple minutes. I've sort of covered the logistical information as well as a basic overview of the unit. So just a reminder again, if you have any questions, let me know by either typing them into the chat box or going ahead and unmuting yourself. And I'm going to move on to eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program. So there's 4 eligibility requirements that are listed in the information packet. The first is that a household needs to have, as I've mentioned a few times now, the income limits are 80% of area median income, which I'll talk a lot more about. The second eligibility requirement to keep in mind is that household priority is typically given based on household composition. Though this item is not going to really come into play for this lottery since there are only studio and 1-bedroom affordable units at Center East Commons. So households of all sizes are going to have the same priority when it comes to these units. So if you have a 2-person household versus a 1-person household, these are still only studio and 1-bedroom apartments. So that larger household is not going to have priority over a smaller household in this case. The third eligibility requirement is that you cannot own a home prior to move-in, or upon move-in, I should say. So all homes, if you own a home right now and you're planning on leasing or planning on applying and hopefully leasing one of these units, you can still apply for the lottery. You would just need to have sold the property by the time you're signing a lease at Center East Commons. And then the fourth eligibility criteria doesn't come up very often either, but households and applicants cannot have financial interest in the development and can't be considered a related party. So if you work for the owner or the leasing office, or you're related to them in some way, you might not be eligible for this lottery. And then just to circle back more on income and assets of the household. So Since these are affordable units, they're going to be made available to households that qualify for the program, and the rent amounts are lower than the market rents that are being set within the community. So maximum income limits for the program are set according to household size. So this includes everyone who will be living in the apartment. So these amounts are listed in the information packet on our website. They're everywhere. They change every April. And as you can see them on your screen now, if your household size is 1, there's only 1 person in your household and 1 person will be living in the apartment, the maximum income limit is $55,800. If you're a 2-person household, then the maximum income limit to qualify for this lottery is $63,800. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we calculate your income when we're thinking about those income limits in just a second. But what you want to keep in mind is that when you're applying for this lottery, you'll be required to submit supporting income, asset, and tax documentation along with your lottery application. So the required documents vary a little bit depending on what your household sources of income is. But that said, everyone who's applying for this lottery will need to submit your most recent federal tax returns for the last year and copies of bank statements for the last 3 months. Section 2 of the application is very detailed and lists all of the information that will need to be verified based on the different sources of income you might have. So if you're employed, for example, how many pay stubs you might need to submit. If you're self-employed, what we'll need from you, that's all detailed in there. So income for the program has to be calculated in a certain way. So it is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So this includes all household member income, including, bonuses, overtime. The only exceptions to this are wages for anyone in your household who's under the age of 18. So if you have a minor that's working, maybe a 16-year-old or something, we're not going to count their wages towards your total household income. And then if you have a dependent full-time student who's living with you, only the first $480 of wages will be included, even if they're over the age of 18. We are required to count gross income, so not the net income you make after taxes, but what is on your pay stub before taxes and other deductions. Of course, we know that you don't actually take home that full amount of your salary, but according to the program, the gross income is required to be counted. And so, like I said, every household income circumstances are unique. Some applicants are going to have a consistent weekly salary throughout the year, but there are other people who might be self-employed or they're working seasonally. And so in those circumstances, we may need to look further back into the past in order to project what your anticipated income would be for the coming year. Specifically for applicants who are self-employed. So you'd need to complete a profit and loss statement and then provide supporting documentation for your business. There is, at the end of the lottery application, there's a template for a sample profit and loss statement. You can fill that out, or if you have your own, you can submit that as well. If you're self-employed, your business expenses are considered when we are tallying up your total household income. But for anyone, any household who does not have self-employment income, it is always going to be the gross income that we must count. In general, all income that you have been making, we're going to need to assume that you will continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation from your employer, for example, that you're no longer working at that job or you're not going to be eligible for overtime in the coming year, for example. If you have a written letter from your employer, we'll be able to take that into consideration. When you're filling out your application, you want to make sure that you're listing all of the income that's coming into your household. So there's a table on the application that is sort of helping you and guiding you through that. But it's not just wages we're looking at. If you have Social Security, child support, a pension, unemployment benefits, all those types of things you're going to want to include on your lottery application. There's no minimum income requirement for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at Center East Commons, want to be sure that all of their tenants can afford the rent, regardless of whether or not the apartment is market rent or it's renting as an affordable unit. So the management company has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. And those amounts are listed on the information packet as well. But as an example, so if you're looking to rent a studio apartment, the approximate minimum household income will be $38,250. If you're looking to rent a one-bedroom apartment, the minimum income amount is $41,250. If you have a Section 8 or other mobile housing voucher, you can disregard those minimum amounts that I just mentioned and that you'll see in the information packet, because they don't apply to your household. And that's because your voucher will be picking up a portion of the rent. However, any applicant who does have a housing voucher, will need to check in with your housing agency just to confirm that the agency that issues your voucher, just to confirm that these rent amounts, the affordable rent amounts, are within the agency or your program's payment standards or maximum rent. The leasing office at Center East Commons will also eventually confirm this with your housing agency, but it's best for you, obviously, to know sooner rather than later if your voucher will be able to be used and these rents will work for your voucher program. If you don't have a housing voucher, your household income needs to be between those minimum income floors that I mentioned and the program's maximum income limits that we talked about earlier. The only exception to that is going to be a household that maybe has a total household income that's just below the minimum income amount that are set by the leasing office. And that's because if your household has some liquid assets, money in your bank account, that you might be able to access to pay rent, then your application may be considered by the leasing office. Ultimately, it's going to be the leasing office's decision if you're lease eligible and if you meet that minimum income requirement. So the minimum income amounts are not strictly enforced because they're not a requirement as those income limits that you saw earlier, which are a program requirement. So again, ultimately, it's going to be the leasing team's decision during their lease screening whether a household meets those minimum income requirements of the 2.5 times the rent. Assets. There is no asset limit for affordable rental opportunities. So you could have a significant amount of money in your bank accounts, for example. You might be retired and you have a lot of money in those assets. You're still eligible to apply for this lottery. You just want to be aware that we are going to need to collect information related to assets, although there is no asset limit. So we'll need copies of bank statements, information about any 401k, your IRAs, any of that sort of thing. Even Venmo, PayPal accounts, those are considered assets as well. And the reason that we need to have that information is because any income that is generated by your assets will need to be counted towards your total household income. And for some people, that's not very much at all. But for others, it could be a little more substantial. All right, so I've covered the eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program and the lottery. So again, just a reminder, any questions, type them into chat or let me know. All right, so the lottery itself. If you're interested in applying, again, we encourage you to get your application in as soon as possible to get the process started. As I mentioned, there are sometimes missing items, because there is a lot of information that is required to verify your income and assets and tax returns and that sort of thing. So most applicants do not submit a 100% complete application on the first try. And that's perfectly fine. Like I said, SEB Housing is going to work with you to make sure that you get everything into us. Even if you think you get everything into us, there may be some other questions that come up when we're reviewing your application. For example, we might have some questions on bank deposits that we need to verify, that sort of thing. It's completely fine. You'll be given additional time to supply that additional information if you need to. We also want to encourage you, if you think you might be interested in both a studio and a one-bedroom, you should indicate that on your application. There's no downside to applying for more than one unit size, but there is a potential downside if you only apply to one unit size and then you decide later on that you might be interested in a different unit size. So if you submit an application that you're interested in the studio only, and then you decide, maybe I might like a one-bedroom as well, that unit might already be taken, or the waiting list may already be, several applicants ahead of you. So just make sure you apply for both if you're interested in both. If you know you're not interested in a studio, then go ahead and omit that. So if you are found eligible after you submit your lottery application, you're going to be sent a lottery application number, and it's going to be in the form of a series of numbers. That's the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery. It's just meant to be an anonymous identifier, so your name isn't called out during the lottery. It's not a ranking of any sort. It just corresponds with the order in which your application was approved. So if you're the very first person to submit your application for Center East Commons and you are approved, your lottery application number is going to be A.001. The letter that you receive from us with that lottery application number, it's going to be an email, by the way, if we have your email address, but the email is going to confirm whether or not your household qualifies for local preference. You will have indicated on your application that you believe your household qualifies for local preference, and you would have submitted the necessary documentation along with your application. That might be a lease showing that you live in Amherst, that sort of thing. Local preference is going to apply to your household if you live in Amherst, you work full-time in the town or for the town, or if you are a guardian of a child attending Amherst Public Schools. Up to 70% of the affordable units at Center East Commons, which is going to be 2 of the 3 apartments, will have local preference, which means that some local preference households will get priority for those units when compared to households who don't have local preference. And there's more information about local preference at the end of the information packet. Obviously, if there isn't a lot of people who are applying from the town, you may still be high up on those lists. And then finally, the email that you receive with your lottery application number is also going to confirm the bedroom size or sizes that you've applied for, and whether or not you need a disabled accessible unit. So when you get that email confirming that you're eligible for the lottery, just make sure to review it and confirm that all of that information appears accurate so that we have everything on there for you. So I have a question that came in directly, so I'm not going to read it out loud, but just give me a second to read it here and I'll get back to you. Great, yeah, I'm glad it was helpful for you. If you don't have a voucher already, you just want to make sure that you make that clear when you are submitting your application. So you would select no, you don't have a voucher right now. If you expect to get it within the next couple weeks, by all means explain that on your application. Yeah, so that's good. That's good to hear. All right, so if you're found ineligible at any time during the lottery, maybe you're over income, you're under income, you're a related party, you own a home, whatever it might be, you're going to be informed, and we encourage you to contact us with any questions so we can make sure to get to the bottom of any questions you have on your ineligibility. Okay, so the lottery itself is going to be held on January 22nd at 6 p.m. It's going to be the same format as this information session. I'll have a lottery box next to me here. The lottery application numbers will go into the box. They'll be drawn out and held up to the screen so you can see the order that they were drawn. As an applicant, you do not need to attend the lottery. You don't actually have to be present for it. The results will be sent to you later on that evening, so you know exactly where you stand on the waiting list. So during the lottery, every lottery number is going to be drawn. Sometimes when we think of lotteries, we think there's just one winner, or in this case, there's 3 units. There's going to be 3 winners. That's not the way this works, though. The Affordable Housing Lottery is held in order for us to establish the waiting list for these units. So in general, of course, it's more beneficial if your number is called early in the lottery, but it may not be the deciding factor on whether or not you're moving forward in the process to lease a unit. Because we still need to take local preference into consideration and all of that when we're formulating the waiting list. Also, there could be households ahead of you on the waiting list who were entered into the lottery but were then found ineligible by the leasing office. Or there may be people who just decide not to rent one of these units after the fact. So if you're drawn later on in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope of being able to rent one of these apartments. You may still have the opportunity to do so and move forward in the process. So following the lottery, we at SCB Housing are going to populate the waiting list. We're going to take local preference and whether your household requires accessible features into consideration, and then we'll send you the waiting list that evening. The list will be sent to everyone by email. It's only going to have your lottery application number on it, so your name isn't going to be listed on the waiting list or anything like that for privacy purposes. So when you're reviewing that email after the lottery, you're going to find your lottery application number, you're going to see where you fall on each waiting list, and you'll then have a better idea as to whether or not you'll be invited forward right away by the leasing office to move forward with the next step in the process, which is applying for a lease. That's the point where we'll be putting you in touch with the leasing office. The top households on the waiting list will be in touch with the management team. Your contact information will be provided to them, and you'll be able to move on to that next step in the process, like I said, which is applying for a lease. You'll be able to, tour a unit, kind of discuss more about your lease update and all of that. So at that point, SCB Housing has already completed your lottery and program eligibility screening, but your household hasn't been screened for that lease eligibility that the leasing office will handle. So as part of their screening, like I said, it's normally some sort of combination of a credit check, background check, to determine whether or not you are eligible to rent with them. You want to be aware that the management team may invite more households to complete a lease screening than there are available units. So for example, at Center East Commons, there's one bedroom affordable unit, but it's possible that the management team there will invite more than one household forward to complete a lease screening. And that's typical, management companies do that usually because the process of leasing apartments can be slowed down by applicants and households who maybe don't qualify or aren't interested. So they want to get more applicants in process than are necessary, or than units, I should say. So if you're the first household on the waiting list and you don't want to immediately inform your landlord that you are giving notice and moving to Center East Commons, because like I said, you still need to be approved by the management team. So just kind of wait it out until you've actually been approved by everyone. So if you're that top person on one of the waiting lists, you're going to have the first chance to reserve one of the affordable apartments. So say you have the top position on the studio unit waiting list. You will be able to select which unit that you are interested in, and that's true even if someone below you on the waiting list finishes their lease eligibility screening first. So the order of the waiting list is always going to be honored. And the second person on the waiting list has second choice, and so forth. Once you're leased, you're done with screenings until your lease renewal date. So at that point, that will be a year from your lease update. We hope that you've been enjoying the apartment and you want to continue living there. If you do, you would just need to recertify your income with the management team prior to your lease renewal. So about 3 months ahead of your lease renewal, you would be getting information from the leasing office reminding you that you're going to need to supply your income information and fill out the recertification. If during the year your income is increased and you now make more than the 80% of the AMI that you needed to make to qualify for the lottery, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable apartments as long as their income does not exceed 140% of the current AMI. So page 17 of the application lists the 140% figures for different household sizes. Just to give you an example, a household of 2 people, so a household size of 2, would have qualified for the lottery with an income at or below $63,800. That same household can make up to $89,320 at the time of their recertification. That would be 140% of current AMI. And that household would still be eligible to rent that affordable apartment. So that covers everything I wanted to get through that was in the information packet. Again, you can find the lottery application for Center East Commons on our website. You can download it there. It's a PDF. If you would rather not download it and you want a copy mailed to you, you can contact us at info@sebhousing.com or at the number that you'll see on our website, the 617 number, and we can mail one to you. We're happy to do that. Just want to stick around for a second if anyone has a question that wasn't covered on either the apartments or the application process. And I'm going to put our contact info up again on the screen. Once again, you can find the application on our website, sebhousing.com. You just go to I would like to rent, and then click on Center East Commons, and you will see it there along with the information packet. All right, we look forward to getting your application, and feel free to reach out if any questions that you had were not talked about in this meeting. Thanks so much for joining, and have a good night. Bye, everybody.